I never expected to hear those words from my mother's mouth, especially not on my first day back home after graduation. But there I was, frozen in the hallway outside my father's study as her voice drifted through the partially open door. Grant's money should be going to us, to Ivy's future, not to Nora. My name is Nora, and I thought coming home would feel like a celebration. Instead, I'm standing here with my suitcase still in hand, listening to my mother plot against me with my half-sister. But Mom, what about Nora? She's still Dad's daughter. Ivy's voice carried a hint of uncertainty. Sweetheart, she's had her chance. 4 years of expensive college education? That's more than enough. Besides, you're the one who's been here, building a real relationship with your father. Nora's practically a stranger now. My fingers tightened around the handle of my suitcase until my knuckles turned white. The familiar scent of Dad's leather-bound books and coffee that usually brought comfort now made my stomach turn. I don't know. Ivy hesitated. It feels wrong. Trust me, darling. I know what's best for this family. Nora's just like her former stepmother, always trying to come between us. We need to make sure your father sees where his priorities should lie. The mention of Lydia, my former stepmother, sent a sharp pain through my chest. She'd been more of a mother to me in the few years she was married to Dad than Celeste had been in my entire life. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who abandoned me when I was 6 was now back, plotting to push me out of my own family. I should have burst through that door. Should have confronted them right there. Instead, I quietly wheeled my suitcase backward, careful not to let it squeak against the hardwood floor. My zoology degree hadn't prepared me for this kind of predatory behavior, at least not from humans. Nora, is that you? Dad's voice boomed from the front door, making me jump. He must have just gotten home from work. I quickly wiped my eyes and plastered on a smile. Hey, Dad. He wrapped me in a bear hug, his familiar cologne mixing with the scent of his leather briefcase. There's my graduate. How was the drive? Before I could answer, Celeste and Ivy emerged from the study, both wearing perfectly crafted smiles. My mother's blonde hair was expertly styled, not a strand out of place, just like her carefully constructed facade. Welcome home, darling, Celeste said, moving in for a hug I didn't want. We were just discussing the celebration dinner tonight. I forced myself to return the hug, feeling like a stranger in my own skin. Can't wait. Dad beamed at all of us, completely oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. My 3 favorite women, all together. This is perfect. Ivy caught my eye for a moment, then quickly looked away. There was guilt there, maybe even a hint of shame, but not enough to make her speak up. I should unpack, I said, already heading for the stairs. Long drive and all. Of course, sweetie. Dad called after me. Dinner's at 7. In my childhood bedroom, I sat on my bed and stared at the photos on my wall, memories of happier times. Dad teaching me to ride a bike. Lydia and me baking cookies. Even a few ancient ones with Celeste, before she decided her new life was more important than her daughter. My phone buzzed with a text from Caleb. Made it home safe? I started typing yes, then deleted it. How could I tell him that home didn't feel safe anymore? That I just overheard my own mother plotting to cut me out of my father's life? Instead, I wrote, "We need to talk. Can you call me later?" I had no idea what I was going to do, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going to let them push me out without a fight. Not this time. The celebration dinner felt like a performance where everyone had memorized their lines except me. Dad sat at the head of the table, beaming with pride as he raised his glass. To Nora's graduation and her bright future ahead. I forced a smile, watching Celeste's perfectly manicured hand rest possessively on Dad's arm. The diamond tennis bracelet he'd given her for their anniversary caught the light, making me think of the simple silver one Lydia used to wear. So, darling, Celeste's voice dripped with honey. What are your plans now? Surely you won't be staying home for long. The loaded question hung in the air. I stabbed at my salmon, buying time. Actually, I've been offered an internship at the local wildlife sanctuary. Dad's face lit up. That's wonderful. Why didn't you tell me? I just found out yesterday, I said, watching Celeste's smile falter slightly. It's a great opportunity, and I can stay home while I build up some experience. Ivy pushed her food around her plate. But I thought we were going to convert the spare room into my art studio. Oh, that's right, Celeste chimed in. Grant, remember we discussed this? Ivy's been doing so well in her art classes. I caught the subtle exchange between them, the same choreographed dance I'd witnessed earlier. My appetite vanished. Well, Dad looked between us, clearly torn. Maybe we can figure something out. The house is plenty big enough for everyone's needs. After dinner, I helped Dad with the dishes while Celeste and Ivy retreated to the living room. The familiar routine of drying plates brought back memories of countless conversations we'd had here, back when it was just the two of us. You seem quiet tonight, kiddo, Dad said, handing me a wet plate. Everything okay? I wanted to tell him everything, about the conversation I'd overheard, about how Celeste was slowly pushing me out, about how much I missed the way things used to be. Instead, I asked, "Do you ever miss Lydia?" The question caught him off guard. He paused, soapy hands hovering over the sink. Sometimes. She was good to us, wasn't she? Yeah, she was. I placed the dried plate in the cabinet. Have you heard from her lately? Not since she moved to take care of her nephew. He resumed washing. Why do you ask? Before I could answer, Celeste appeared in the doorway. Grant, honey, could you help me with something in the study? Of course. He dried his hands, giving my shoulder a quick squeeze. We'll finish catching up later, okay? I watched him follow Celeste, feeling the distance between us grow with each step. Through the window, I could see Ivy in the backyard, talking on her phone. Curiosity got the better of me, and I slipped out the back door, staying in the shadows. I don't know if I can do this anymore, Ivy was saying, her voice trembling.
She's not what Mom said she'd be like.
She seems normal. A pause. No, I haven't forgotten what Mom said about needing security. But maybe there's another way. Another pause. I know. Family first. But isn't Nora family too? My phone buzzed in my pocket, Caleb calling. I retreated inside, finding my way to Dad's study. The door was ajar again, and I heard Celeste's voice. The wildlife sanctuary? Really, Grant? She needs to start looking for real opportunities, preferably in another city. She can't stay here forever. She just got home, Celeste. Let her find her footing. I'm thinking of her future. And Ivy's. They both need space to grow. I'd heard enough. I slipped away to my room and finally answered Caleb's call. Hey. His warm voice filled my ear. How's the homecoming? Remember when we used to watch those nature documentaries about animals marking their territory? I sat on my bed, staring at the photo of Dad and me at my high school graduation. Turns out humans aren't so different. That bad, huh? Worse. I lowered my voice. I need your help with something. How good are you at digging up information? What kind of information? I took a deep breath. The kind that might explain why my mother suddenly reappeared in our lives 2 years ago and why she's so desperate to secure her position here. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made me pause. I'll call you back tomorrow. But Caleb, whatever we find, it has to be bulletproof. I can't risk losing my dad again. The first thing I noticed in Dad's home office was how much had changed. The framed photo of me and Lydia at my high school science fair was gone, replaced by an artsy black and white portrait of Celeste and Ivy. But the old leather chair still creaked the same way as I sat down at his desk. I hadn't planned on snooping through Dad's computer. But when I spotted the bank statement he'd left open on his desk, the numbers jumped out at me like red flags. What are you doing in here? I nearly jumped out of my skin. Ivy stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Looking for a stapler, I said, sliding the statement under some papers. Dad always keeps one in here. Right. She lingered, shifting her weight from one foot to another. Listen, about yesterday. You mean about how you and Mom are planning to push me out of my own home? The words came out sharper than I intended. Ivy's face flushed. It's not like that. Mom says we need to secure our future. That Dad might change his mind about us. Change his mind? About what? Before she could answer, Celeste's voice rang out from downstairs. Ivy, your art teacher's here. Ivy practically fled the room. I turned back to the bank statement, my hands shaking as I pulled it out. Large withdrawals, all made in the past year, totaling nearly $50,000. The dates corresponded with Celeste's charity fundraisers, events Dad never attended because they always conflicted with his business trips. My phone buzzed, a text from Caleb. Found something interesting about your mom. Call when you can. I was about to reply when voices drifted up from the garden below the office window. I recognized Celeste's laugh, but the other voice made me freeze. The plan's working perfectly, Celeste was saying. Grant doesn't suspect a thing. Once we secure the trust fund adjustment, we can move forward. And the daughter? A man's voice, unfamiliar. Nora? She's becoming a problem, but I have ways of dealing with problems. I fumbled for my phone, trying to record their conversation, but they were already moving away. My heart pounded as I processed what I'd heard. Trust fund adjustment? Ways of dealing with problems? The sound of Dad's car pulling into the driveway sent me scrambling. I quickly photographed the bank statement and replaced it exactly as I'd found it. Hey, kiddo. Dad called out as I descended the stairs. Want to grab lunch? Actually, Celeste appeared from the garden all smiles. I was hoping you could help me with some paperwork, Grant. It's about Ivy's college fund. I watched Dad's face light up at the mention of Ivy. Rain check on lunch, Nora? Sure, Dad. I forced a smile. No problem. Back in my room, I called Caleb. Your mother filed for bankruptcy 3 years ago, he said without preamble, right before she showed up at your dad's door. And get this, she was being investigated for fraud at her previous husband's company. The pieces started falling into place. She's after Dad's money. She always has been. There's more. I found a connection between her and a guy named Marcus Chen. He's... Nora? Ivy's voice outside my door made me jump. Mom wants to know if you're joining us for dinner. Just a minute. I turned back to the phone. Who's Marcus Chen? He's a lawyer specializing in trust fund modifications and estate planning. And according to social media, he was at your house today, posed as an art teacher. My blood ran cold. The man in the garden. Caleb, I need a favor. Can you help me find someone? Who? I took a deep breath. Lydia Harper, my former stepmother. If anyone knows how to handle Celeste, it's her. I'll see what I can find. But Nora? Be careful. People who are desperate for money can be dangerous. After hanging up, I stared at the bank statement photos on my phone. Dad had always taught me that evidence was everything in business. Numbers don't lie, he'd say. Well, these numbers were telling a story, one of deception, manipulation, and theft. And somewhere in this house, my mother was working on her next move. The question was, could I expose her before she destroyed everything I loved? A text from an unknown number lit up my screen. Miss Whitfield, this is Marcus Chen. We should talk about your mother. Marcus Chen's text message burned in my pocket as I sat across from Dad at breakfast. He was absorbed in his morning paper, just like always, while Celeste fluttered around the kitchen making her signature green smoothies. I made enough for everyone, she announced, sliding a glass toward me. I watched her sip from her own glass, wondering if she'd ever actually drink something I prepared. No thanks. I'm meeting Caleb for coffee. Dad lowered his paper. Caleb? Is this someone special? Before I could answer, Celeste chimed in. Oh, Grant, don't embarrass her. Though it would be lovely to see Nora settled down, wouldn't it? Maybe even moved into her own place. The familiar ache in my chest returned. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. I should go. Actually, Dad folded his paper. Could you stop by the office later? There's something I want to discuss. The hope in his voice made my stomach twist. Sure, Dad. At the coffee shop, Caleb was already waiting with 2 steaming mugs. You look like you've seen a ghost. More like I'm living with one. I pulled out my phone and showed him Chen's message. What do you think? Could be a trap, he said, studying the text. Or he could be turning on your mother. Either way, it's dangerous. I have to know what he wants. I wrapped my hands around my coffee mug, seeking warmth. Did you find anything about Lydia? Better. He slid an envelope across the table. I found her. Inside was an address, less than 2 hours away. My hands trembled as I read it. "There's something else," Caleb said quietly. I did some digging into Ivy's background. "Nora, there's no record of Grant being listed as her father on her birth certificate." The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too crowded. What? The space for father is blank. And the timing? Celeste was already pregnant when she left your dad. My phone buzzed, another text from Chin. "Time-sensitive information. Meeting today or never." "I have to go," I said, standing abruptly. "Dad wants to see me at his office." "Nora, wait." Caleb caught my arm. "Whatever you're planning, be careful. People like your mother, they don't just give up when they're exposed." The drive to Dad's office gave me time to think. About Ivy, who might not even be my sister. About Celeste, who'd abandoned one daughter only to use another as a pawn. About Dad, who deserved so much better than this web of lies. His secretary waved me straight through to his office. He was standing at the window, hands clasped behind his back. "Remember how we used to have lunch here every Saturday?" he asked without turning around. "You'd sit in that big leather chair, pretending to review contracts while coloring in your zoo animals book." "Dad, I'm changing my will, Nora." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" He finally turned, his face etched with what looked like guilt. "Celeste thinks it's best to put everything in a family trust. For you and Ivy's future." A trust controlled by whom? Well, Celeste would be the primary trustee until you girls are 30. It's just a precaution, really.
My phone buzzed again.
Chin. Final offer. Plaza Hotel, 2 p.m. "Dad, there's something you need to know." "I know you and Celeste have your differences," he interrupted, "but she's trying. She wants what's best for our family." Our family. The words echoed hollowly. "I have to go," I managed, backing toward the door. "But Dad, before you sign anything, please wait. Just for a few days." "Nora, please." He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, a few days."
Outside his office, I checked the time.
1:30 p.m. The Plaza Hotel was 15 minutes away. My phone lit up with a text from Caleb. "Made contact with Lydia. She wants to help." I took a deep breath and typed back. "Tell her to wait. I'm about to do something really stupid." Then I got in my car and headed for the plaza, where either Marcus Chin would help me expose the truth, or I'd walk straight into Celeste's trap. The Plaza Hotel lobby felt like a stage set for a trap. I chose a seat with my back to the wall, watching the entrance while pretending to read a magazine. My phone buzzed with another message from Caleb. "Don't do this alone. I'm 10 minutes away." Before I could respond, a man in an expensive suit approached my table. "Miss Whitfield?" Marcus Chun. He wasn't what I expected. Younger, with kind eyes that didn't match his reputation. He sat without waiting for an invitation. "I assume you're recording this conversation," he said, placing his phone face down on the table. "You should be." I kept my expression neutral. "Why did you contact me?" "Because your mother is about to make a terrible mistake." He slid a manila envelope across the table. "And because I have a conscience, despite what my profession might suggest." Inside were documents, bank statements, emails, and what looked like legal papers. My hands froze when I saw Ivy's birth certificate. "She's not just conning my father, is she?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "This is bigger. Your mother has done this before. 3 times, to be exact. Wealthy men, second marriages, teenage daughters used as pawns." He leaned forward. "But she's never had opposition like you before. Why help me now, after helping her set this up? Because this time, she's planning something worse than financial fraud. The trust fund isn't just about control, it's about..." "Nora?" My heart stopped. Ivy stood a few feet away, her face pale. Behind her, Celeste emerged from behind a pillar, her smile razor-sharp. "What a coincidence," Celeste said, her voice dripping honey. "Marcus, darling, I didn't know you were meeting my daughter today." Chen's face remained impassive. "Just discussing some legal matters, Celeste." "I'm sure you were." She placed her hands on Ivy's shoulders. "Sweetheart, why don't you wait in the car? The adults need to talk." But Ivy didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the birth certificate still visible in the envelope.
Mom?
"What is that?" "Nothing, dear. Just. It's your birth certificate," I said, meeting my sister's my not-quite-sister's eyes. "The real one." The color drained from Celeste's face. "Marcus, I thought we had an understanding." "We did." He stood slowly. "Until I saw the insurance policy." My blood ran cold. "What insurance policy?" "Nora." Caleb's voice cut through the tension. He was rushing across the lobby, phone in hand. "Your father, he's in the hospital. There was an accident at his office." The world tilted sideways. Through the roaring in my ears, I heard Celeste's sharp intake of breath. "What kind of accident?" I demanded, but I already knew. The green smoothies. The sudden interest in Dad's health. The insurance policy. "Suspected poisoning," Caleb said quietly. "They're pumping his stomach now." Ivy stumbled backward. "Mom, don't be ridiculous," Celeste snapped, but her perfectly manicured hands were shaking. "This is absurd. I'm going to the hospital." "No." I stepped between her and the exit. "You're not going anywhere near him. You can't stop me. I'm his wife. And I'm his daughter." I held up my phone, showing the recording app's running timer. "And I have everything I need to prove what you really are." Chun cleared his throat. "The police are already on their way, Celeste. I sent them copies of everything an hour ago." The mask finally cracked. Celeste's face contorted with rage as she lunged for the envelope, but Caleb was faster, pulling me back while Chin blocked her path. "Ivy," I called out as security approached. "Come with me, please." She looked between us, her mother and me, tears streaming down her face. Then she took a step toward me, just as the first police officer entered the lobby. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Lydia. "I'm at the hospital with Grant. He's asking for you. Both of you." I took Ivy's hand, and together we walked away from the sound of Celeste's protests as the officers read her rights. We had a father to protect, and maybe, just maybe, a family to rebuild. But first, we had to make sure he survived. The hospital corridor seemed endless as I ran, Ivy's hand still clutched in mine. The fluorescent lights made everything look harsh and unreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. When we reached Dad's room, Lydia was already there, her familiar presence both comforting and surreal. "He's stable," she said before I could ask. They caught it in time. Through the window, I could see Dad connected to monitors, looking smaller somehow against the white sheets. My strong, confident father, reduced to this. "The police want to talk to you both," Caleb said quietly behind us. "They need statements about Celeste." Ivy's hand tightened in mine. "I didn't know she was poisoning him. I swear I didn't." "But you knew about the other things," I said, not as a question. "The trust fund, the manipulation." She pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. She said it was for our future, that we deserved it after everything we'd been through. "Miss Whitfield," a detective approached, notebook in hand. "We need to discuss your mother's previous incidents." Previous incidents, like what happened to Dad, was just another entry in a logbook of Celeste's crimes. I felt sick. "Can it wait?" I gestured toward Dad's room. "He's waking up." Actually, the detective's face hardened. "We need to talk now. Your father's lawyer is here with some concerning documents." Marcus Chin emerged from around the corner, looking grave. "Nora, there's something you need to see. The trust fund papers. Your father signed them this morning." The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "What?" "Everything's been transferred. The house, the business assets, everything. Celeste is the primary trustee. But she's being arrested." I protested. "She tried to kill him, and she's already posted bail," the detective added. High-priced lawyers showed up minutes after booking. Lydia stepped forward. "There has to be something we can do." "There might be," Chin said, "but it's complicated. The poisoning charges might not stick. She's claiming it was an accident with cleaning supplies in his coffee cup." And with the trust fund in place. She wins, I whispered. Even from jail, she wins. Dad's monitors beeped steadily in the background as I processed this. Everything I'd done, the investigation, the confrontation, all of it, had somehow made things worse. Nora? Dad's weak voice carried through the doorway. I moved to go to him, but the detective blocked my path. Miss Whitfield, we still need that statement. Let her through, Lydia insisted. Just give them a minute. Inside the room, Dad looked at me with clouded eyes. I'm sorry, he whispered. I should have listened. Don't, I said, taking his hand. Just focus on getting better. The papers, I signed them because... He coughed, because she threatened to take Ivy away. Said she'd reveal things. Destroy the company's reputation. Of course. Celeste's final manipulation, using Ivy as leverage, knowing Dad would do anything to protect his family, even one built on lies. A commotion in the hallway drew my attention. Through the window, I saw Celeste striding toward us, flanked by 2 lawyers. Her makeup was perfect, her smile triumphant. I'm here to see my husband, she announced, and to discuss living arrangements with my daughters. Ivy shrank back against the wall. I stepped between them, even as the lawyers started spouting legal terms about custody and trustee rights. You don't get to win, I said, my voice shaking. Not like this. Celeste's smile widened.
Oh, darling.
I already have. The only question is whether you'll accept it gracefully or force me to have you removed from the property, which I now legally control. Behind me, Dad's monitors started beeping faster. The triumphant look on Celeste's face, the helplessness in Ivy's eyes, the weight of everything we stood to lose, it all crashed over me at once. Then Caleb touched my arm, slipping something into my hand. A phone with a recording app running. And suddenly, I remembered something from my zoology studies. Sometimes, when an animal is cornered, that's when it's most dangerous. Actually, Mother, I said, straightening my spine, I think we need to discuss what really happened to your last husband. The smile froze on Celeste's face, and for the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. What did you just say? Celeste's voice had lost its honeyed tone, replaced by something sharp and cold. I held up the phone, making sure everyone could see the recording app still running. Marcus wasn't the only one who kept records. Lydia did too, didn't you? Lydia stepped forward, her face set with determination. I knew something wasn't right when I read about Richard Palmer's death. Your 3rd husband, wasn't he, Celeste? The lawyers exchanged worried glances as Celeste's perfectly manicured nails dug into her palms. This is ridiculous. We're here about Grant's recovery and the trust. The trust you forced him to sign. I interrupted, just like you forced Richard Palmer to change his will 2 days before his accidental fall. The detective had stopped writing in his notebook, his full attention now on our confrontation. Ivy pressed herself against the wall, her eyes darting between us like she was watching a tennis match with lethal stakes. You don't know what you're talking about, Celeste hissed. Don't I? I pulled out the envelope Chun had given me. Richard Palmer's accident report. Thomas Blackwood's suspicious car crash. And now Dad's cleaning supply incident. 3 wealthy men, 3 teenage daughters used as pawns, 3 convenient accidents. Celeste's lawyers started whispering urgently to each other. One reached for his phone. The pattern's pretty clear. I continued. Find a wealthy man with a daughter. Use your own daughter to create an instant family, gain control of the assets, and then... Enough. Celeste lunged for the envelope, but Caleb was faster, pulling me back while Chun blocked her path. Mom, Ivy's voice cracked. Is it true? About my real father? The moment hung suspended, like a drop of poison before it falls. Everything I did was for you, Celeste said, her mask finally cracking. To give you the life you deserved. By lying. Ivy pushed away from the wall. By making me think these men were my father? By helping you kill them? I never said, Celeste started, but Ivy cut her off. The tea, she whispered. The special tea you always made them drink. The one you tried to give me when I started asking questions about my real dad. The detective's pen scratched rapidly across his notebook. One of the lawyers quietly backed toward the door. "It was all for us," Celeste insisted, reaching for Ivy. "Everything I did was for yourself," I finished. "And now you've lost everything." Dad's voice, weak but clear, carried from his hospital bed. "The trust fund papers. I want them voided." "You can't," Celeste snapped. "It's legally binding." "Not if they were signed under duress," Chin interjected. "Or if the trustee is under investigation for attempted murder." The detective stepped forward, reaching for his handcuffs. "Mrs. Whitfield, we need you to come with us. We have some questions about Richard Palmer's accident." "You can't prove anything," she snarled, but her perfectly constructed world was crumbling around her. "Maybe not," I agreed. "But Ivy can." Celeste's face went slack as she looked at her daughter, her last remaining pawn, her final weapon, standing firmly beside me. "I'm sorry, Mom," Ivy said, tears streaming down her face. "But I choose the truth." As the detective led Celeste away, her threats and protests echoing down the hospital corridor, I felt the weight of the past few weeks finally lift. Dad was alive. The truth was out. And somehow, in trying to destroy our family, Celeste had helped us build a stronger one. "Nora?" Ivy touched my arm hesitantly. "What happens now?" I looked at Dad, still weak but smiling, at Lydia, who had never stopped protecting us, at Caleb, who had stood by me through everything. "Now," I said, taking my sister's hand, my real sister, bound by choice rather than blood. "We start over. Together." Through the hospital window, I could see Celeste being placed in a police car, her perfect facade finally shattered. Sometimes I realized the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemy. It's about protecting what they tried to take from you. And we had done exactly that. 6 months later, I stood in the Wildlife Sanctuary's Rehabilitation Center, watching a red-tailed hawk test its healed wing. The morning sun filtered through the mesh enclosure, catching the bird's feathers as it took flight, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. "Ready to release her?" Caleb asked, coming up beside me with the transport cage. "Almost." I checked my notes one last time. Just like the doctors did with Dad, we have to make sure she's strong enough. Dad had come home from the hospital 3 months ago, his recovery marked by small victories and careful steps forward. Like this hawk, healing took time. The doorbell at the main entrance chimed. Through the window, I saw Ivy shifting nervously on the front steps, her new school backpack slung over one shoulder. Our weekly lunch dates had become a ritual, a way of rebuilding what Celeste had tried to destroy. "Your sister's early," Caleb noted, squeezing my hand before heading back to his office. The word sister no longer carried the weight of confusion it once did. DNA didn't matter. What mattered was the choice we made every day to be family. "Hey," Ivy said as I let her in. "Is that the hawk you told me about? The one that was poisoned?" I nodded, leading her to the enclosure. "Someone left out toxic bait, but she survived. She's stronger than they expected." The parallel wasn't lost on either of us. News of Celeste's trial had dominated local headlines for weeks. The evidence from her previous husband's deaths had been circumstantial, but the attempted murder of Dad, combined with Ivy's testimony about this special tea, had been enough. She wouldn't be manipulating any more families for a very long time. "Dad asked about you yesterday," I said, watching the hawk land gracefully on a perch. "He and Lydia are hosting a dinner this weekend. You should come." Ivy's fingers traced the edge of the enclosure. "Are you sure? After everything?" "Family isn't about deserving," I replied, echoing words Dad had said to us both. "It's about choosing." She pulled an envelope from her backpack. "Then maybe you can help me with this. It's a letter from Mom." My breath caught. The hawk above us rustled its feathers, preparing for another flight. "She wants forgiveness," Ivy continued, her voice tight. "Says she did it all for me, that she's changed." "What do you want to do?" "I don't know." She looked up at the hawk. "How do you know when something's ready to be free?" I thought about the past 6 months, about Dad and Lydia's careful rekindling of their relationship, about late-night talks with Caleb about trust and vulnerability, about learning to let go of anger without forgetting its lessons. Sometimes, I said, opening the enclosure door, you have to take the risk. But you don't have to do it alone. The hawk hesitated at the threshold, wild freedom beckoning. Then it spread its wings and soared, disappearing into the morning sky. Ivy tucked the unopened letter back into her bag. Maybe next week. Right now, I'd rather have lunch with my sister. As we walked to the Sanctuary's cafe, I spotted Dad's car pulling into the parking lot. He and Lydia stepped out, carrying what looked suspiciously like engagement announcement cards. Another choice, another step forward. My phone buzzed with a text from Chin. Final paperwork filed. Trust fund officially dissolved. Thought you'd want to know. I smiled, remembering something I'd learned in my zoology studies. In nature, there's no such thing as a perfect ending. There are just new beginnings, each carrying the wisdom of what came before. Hey, Caleb called from his office. The hawk's tracking beacon is working perfectly. Want to see where she's headed? Ivy and I exchanged glances, then moved to join him. Sometimes the best revenge against those who tried to cage you isn't about punishment at all. It's about spreading your wings anyway, choosing your own path, and taking flight with the family you choose. The hawk's signal blinked steadily on Caleb's screen, moving forward, always forward. Just like us.